Hello, welcome to Asia in Review at ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Hong Jiang, and today we are talking about a very significant issue, and the topic of today's discussion is Hawaii residents sue former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin. And with me today in the studio is my guest, Ben Maloney, who is a marketing director of Taste of Life magazine and also a practitioner of Falun Gong. And Ben, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Let me give some background. As you can see, Ben in the background over there speaking at the A rally. And let me talk about this rally a little bit. So you were there. This is just last Sunday on August 16th. So it's a rally of Falun Gong practitioners and supporters in Honolulu, in Chinatown, to support the lawsuits against former Chinese President Jiang Zemin. And lawsuits against Jiang came mostly in China to the authorities in Beijing, mostly Chinese residents, citizens in China, and also people from places like Hawaii. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So far, there are already 150,000 people filed a lawsuit against Jiang Zemin. For what? For crimes committed in the 16-year-long persecution of Falun Gong in China. We'll talk a little bit more about what is Falun Gong, how did the persecution take place in China in this hour of program. And crime charged include torture to coerce confession, murder, abuse of inmates, abuse of power, wrongful arrest and imprisonment, torture, organ harvesting. So altogether, there were 18 counts of crimes against Jiang Zemin. And also there are 12 Hawaii residents also participated in these lawsuits. So we'll get a little bit more into that. So Ben, maybe you can share a little bit about your impression, as somebody who attended the rally and spoke at the rally.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that the wave of lawsuits is really growing, and so in other areas, bigger metropolitan areas like New York and San Francisco, it's pretty large. And so here in Hawaii, I think is pretty typical of Hawaii. We had a little bit smaller than they would, but it's pretty representative of us and our population. I think it was very interesting because often when you're talking about human rights, you're talking about human rights in China. For a lot of people, it's hard. I think it's hard for them to grasp. It's a big concept. So when you're able to talk about one issue of it and you're able to talk about a lawsuit, I think it's an interesting angle to bring up with people. And so I think I found people that I talked to were pretty interested, and overall I'd call it a really great day, yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One thing that's really, really interesting, we talk about these big questions like persecution against a group. The largest group being persecuted in China is the Falun Gong group. Of course, most people who are experience persecution are Falun Gong practitioners in China. But then you have Falun Gong practitioners in China came out of China and come to reside with us in Honolulu here. And on that day, on Sunday, we had 2 people shared their experience of being persecuted. The first one is William. You've learned about William's stories from some time ago, right?
Yeah, for me, as a Westerner and someone that hasn't really experienced directly in China persecution and being involved with it for many years, it's one thing to talk a lot about it. It's one thing to see statistics on it. But I remember actually we were in New York for a human rights rally a few years ago, and that was when William shared his story with me more in depth. And yeah, almost moved to tears, getting teary-eyed. It's just such a, to be jailed for 7 years, and often that's not even, the length of sentences can vary. People jail for much longer in China, but particularly William, to be jailed for 7 years for committing no crime, for meditating, something that I do on a daily basis, something we do in the park, and something that's so widely accepted in the Western world, and to undergo torture and things that are almost unspeakable is, it's a very loss for words almost.
Yeah, and that's, William, somebody who's living among us here in Honolulu. And another person who shared at the rally is Qingming Zhang. And he came last year. I personally also was involved in helping a little bit for his family who came out of China and knowing nobody here in Honolulu. So it's a family of 3, and so Qingming was dismissed from work. It was a very good job. He was working for an airplane manufacturer in Harbin, and dismissed from work just because he wanted to continue to practice Falun Gong. And his family was chased after by the police, and they had to hide out in many different places and have their young son left with relatives. And later on, their son couldn't go to school because of Falun Gong practice. So it's just amazing to hear these stories. You know, for me, you know, I'm from China. I hear these stories, but then to have somebody coming out to our midst in Honolulu and share that kind of experience and make you really enjoy the freedom, appreciate the freedom that we have here in Honolulu here, in the U.S. You spoke at the rally, and we can see the photos, at the background photo of you speaking at the rally. Talk a little bit about your, feeling about attending the rally. What was the message that you want to get out?
Yeah, I think for myself, being involved in human rights in China for 7, almost 8 years now, it's really clear to me that it's really one of the most egregious human rights violations in history. Having heard firsthand reports, you get all the way into the organ harvesting of live people, which is something that is as egregious as anything that the Nazis did. And so, I know it's thrown around a lot. People throw around that term a lot. Oh, they're like the Nazis. They're like the Nazis. Yeah. And so it's lost its weight a little bit when you talk about it. But when you really look at the crimes that the Communist Party has committed against peaceful, innocent, law-abiding practitioners of Falun Gong over the 16 years, you do see that it's as egregious as the Nazis. And I think history could reveal the numbers being pretty large as well. Because you have to remember that in China in 1999, there were 70 to 100 million people practicing Falun Gong. So it's basically 1 out of 3 Americans practicing Falun Gong. And so when you have this campaign, and the only news source and the only media source, the only information that you're getting is from the party that's doing the persecution, it's very hard to understand the numbers of who was taken, who was put underground, who was possibly killed. So although we have some estimates and it's very hard to know what those numbers are.
That's right. And in terms of the lawsuits against Jiang Zemin in China, and then here in Hawaii, have you spoken with people around the rally, and do they feel it's kind of relevant issue for them?
I think it's hard for Westerners to understand the significance of something that seems foreign to them, right? It doesn't. Jiang Zemin may be a name that they don't even know. A lot of Americans, if you ask them who's leading China, they may not know, or they may not understand the political system of China. They call themselves communists, right? But although it's a 9-member standing Politburo, really you're talking about, especially during Jiang Zemin's time from 89, 93 to the 2000s, you kind of...
Around 2003.
2003, yeah. Right? So the 10-year period, 12-year period, you're talking about real totalitarian.
That's right.
So for a while, you had Mao Zedong. You couldn't call that communism. You call that totalitarianism. And so Jiang was the same way, and the way he ruled was the same way. Supreme leader of China, really. So all of his policies that he put into place, personally put into place, are really what set in motion the persecution that we still have today. So he's personally responsible it's not something that just happened under his watch. It's something that he personally went after. As a leader, he basically said, this is too many people practicing this peaceful practice. It is a throwback in a way to ancient Chinese values that we destroyed during the Maoist Communist Revolution. We don't believe in that. We're atheists. You as a Communist Party member are atheist. These Buddhist values, we don't believe in them at all. And these numbers scare me. And also, I want to create pure faction power. So by starting this persecution of Falun Gong, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have people align with me. And the people that won't align with me, I'll know then that I'm not the supreme leader. So he's completely responsible for these egregious human rights violations.
And also what's interesting is that, so his term as a president ended in 2003, but he continued to hold power even till today. He still wanted to remain powerful, and there are a lot of followers of him who wanted to continue the persecution, and that's where I think that's why the persecutions continued on even after his term.
Yeah, he set into motion the ability for that to happen. One of the first things he created was something called the 610 office. So the 610 office was essentially a whole arm of the government specifically tasked with persecuting these peaceful meditators. I mean, it sounds wild from a Western perspective. It's hard to even grasp your head around, but that's an entire arm of the government whose only sole purpose was like finding information about and persecuting. And that office still exists today. So it's not anything that has changed.
Yeah, 610. So that was an organization. It's outside of the judicial system. It's separate system that was established on June 10th. That's where the numbers are coming from. In case our audience members don't know about it. And what's interesting is that I have family members in China, and inside jail cells, there are actually 610 office there who's in charge of Falun Gong practitioners in the jails. Even if a practitioner who's in prison there needed some kind of a parole or some kind of medical bail, then 610 office would be the one who approve it and approve it. And so it's so kind of penetrating in the whole of the Chinese society. But it's like a Gestapo kind of organization. It's not part of the law.
It's hard for Westerners to grasp the thinking of the Communist Party, right? It's irrational. So a lot of Westerners think about it like try to relate it to American politics or try to relate it to politics around the world of a freer country, and you can't do it, and you can't understand the motivations in a logical or ethical way. There's no ethics behind it. There's no logic behind it. This is a pretty evil and perpetuating evil system that they have.
Yeah, one of the things, just dovetail what you said there, there's a constitution, right, in a country. There are these laws in China. But, party members like Jiang Zemin, head of the party, he didn't have to obey the law. So he actually launched the persecution not according to the law. And he made his regulations as if they are laws. And these, police and 610 officers would go out and arrest people. That's why it's interesting. He is charged, according to Chinese law, 14 counts of crimes.
Right.
So he's breaking the Chinese law left and right all these years, and that's what's happening in China.
So that really goes into, too, the idea that there's no separation of powers, especially under his rule and Jiang Zemin's rule, and that's something that kind of Mao formed, but you're talking about he's everything. So even having the head of the army, president, premier, having these different titles
he was the head of everything.
Is meaningless. It's like I could make a business card with any title I wanted because
that's right, yeah.
Ultimately he's just controlling everything. So he controls the army, he controls the police factions, which really act like the army anyways, and then so there's no checking, there's no balance of powers, there's no bicameral legislature, there's nothing.
And that's why the persecution in China can be so severe, with the torture, with the organ harvesting, and so inhumane. And also that's why, 16 years later, Falun Gong practitioners all over the world are suing him, according to Chinese law and international law. This is actually a good place for us to take a short break. So we will take a short break and we'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Kili'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute and host on Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ehana Kako. Every week, we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to ThinkTech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. We're Ehana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
Hi, this is ThinkTech Asia. We're live, we're back. And we've been talking about Hawaii residents sue former Chinese President Jiang Zemin. My guest is Ben Maloney here. And let's bring up some more photos of the rally that took place last Sunday. And as you can see, this is speaking about the crimes that Jiang Zemin has committed and being charged by these lawsuits. And next one. So that was in Chinatown. That's where a lot of Falun Gong practitioners would go on Sundays to give out information. So Sunday late morning, if anybody's interested, you can go there and talk to one of them. Next one. We actually, in terms of Falun Gong practitioners and supporters, as you can see, there are people of all different ages. And this is one of the speakers there, William Liang, who shared about his stories of being imprisoned and tortured in China, imprisoned for 7 years in China for practicing Falun Gong. The next one is Qingming Zhang, whose family, that on the left, you can see that's his son, who couldn't go to school because of family's practice of Falun Gong. They had to escape persecution, police arrest, to come to Honolulu last year. So I think that's probably the last of the photos over there. Let's get back to your story. You know, Falun Gong started in China, and there, as you mentioned, how many 70 to 100 million people in China practicing. But since, I think, especially since Falun Gong was persecuted in China in 1999, more people start to know about Falun Gong. So Falun Gong right now has spread to many countries in the world, right?
Yeah, I think over 120 countries, there's practitioners, and right now is about back to those numbers, about 100 million worldwide, of every variety, every ethnicity that you could imagine. For sure, I've met practitioners from every corner of the world.
Let's use your experience as an example, and so that our audience members would know, like, what is Falun Gong? As a practitioner of Falun Gong, what do you do? Yeah,
it's interesting. I think, you know, for me, I was introduced to meditation through Falun Gong meditation when I was like 20 years old. And so having really concepts about Western religions, little concepts about the East, the idea of improving myself through like principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, and not having really any religious dogma attached to it, kind of this idea that, hey, come to the park and practice if you want. If you don't want to practice, no one's going to come make you. No one's going to ever ask you for money. These really appealed to me. I thought, wow, that this is really good. And I remember, you know, the first time that I did the meditation, because I was like a college student doing everything that all Westerners are doing, and I think seeking something more. And so I remember the first time that I did the meditation feeling like, wow, I've never felt like that before. Like my thoughts had gone away. I was able to like kind of separate myself from this like anxiety and all these kind of racing thoughts. And I thought like, I need to do this. I need to find out what this is.
That sounds good. It probably helped with the school studies and dealing with conflicts in daily lives.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, practically speaking, when I talk to Westerners or talk to my friends about the benefits of meditation, really one of the biggest things is that it kind of gives me a buffer. So it's hard to explain how or why it works. You know, there's a lot of studies on brain chemistry, there's a lot of studies on mindfulness and compassion and those things having real influences in people's lives. And for sure, I'm a testament to that. So for me, you know, everyday life, like for instance, today at work, there was this thing where somebody's getting really upset. There's miscommunication about a project that we're working on, and so immediately, like they're coming at me with all these things, and I didn't even feel anything. I felt really, really calm, and I was able to be like, really put myself in the other person's position, and I could say, you know, I understand where you're coming from. I feel like, you know, I wasn't able to communicate with you enough. Clearly, you needed more communication than I thought. And I really apologize for that, and I can work on that going forward. And you know, here are some actionable items that we can do. And then she came back with, yeah, you know, I just really felt this way. And so I could see how when you're really compassionate and you don't have that immediate knee-jerk reaction to these negative emotions like anger or frustration or any of those things, you're not taking this attack personally, you can see that that person is reacting that way because they're feeling something, and how can we address that, and how can we improve that? And then her being able to share her feelings back really allowed us to like move forward. And so it was really that compassion that I practice on a daily basis. You know, it's easy to say I practice compassion and tolerance and kindness, but what does that mean in everyday life?
Especially when things happen, that's when
that's when the rubber meets the road.
That's
you know, it's when your personal interests are at stake. It's when it's the hardest to remain calm that meditation can help, and the practice can help, you know.
It's interesting to hear, what you said about the practice and your experience with it. It really is almost like opposite of what a lot of people are doing these days, and they run fast and they go after a lot of things external. And here you're turning internal to really look inside and to do the meditation, to follow these wonderful principles of being truthful, compassionate, and tolerant. And this will be something that, think about like everybody would need. And it's just unbelievable a practice like this is being persecuted in China.
Yeah, I think people do practice elements without realizing that they're practicing, looking inward. You know, the idea of, I look inward, the idea of karma is really just the idea of like cause and effect. Like I act in this way and these are things that happen. I act in this way, these are things that happen. And so often there's a lot of things that are going to happen in life that we're not able to control, that are definitely not going to be positive things. And so when we know those things are coming, obviously we all know the only thing we can control is our own reactions and our own feelings towards it. And often I feel like people, this lack of control makes them react in negative and unhealthy ways. And meditation for me has allowed me, for the most part, to react very healthily to those things and know that the only thing I can ultimately control in some situations is how I feel. And ultimately, sometimes those things, they pass by very quickly and they don't matter. But if you have that anger, you have that hatred, or you don't have that compassion or kindness, then those things will stay with you.
Interesting, a lot of people in China, I understand, get into Falun Gong practice because of health. I come from China. I've known people, family members, who had very, very difficult health issues, and they get into Falun Gong, and that helped them great deal to healing. Very difficult issues that the modern medicine can't deal with, can help, and then the Falun Gong practice help them. And then you'll have people like you who, probably didn't have these health issues, and get into the practice of Falun Gong. Among the people non-Chinese, what are the kind of various reasons, or maybe similar reasons, for them to get into Falun Gong practice?
Yeah, I think everyone at a certain age, some younger than others, kind of realize that, this rat race that we're all in inevitably of going to a job, and especially in the Western world, of going to a job every day, making money and needing to do that, and kind of this materialism and this idea of like stacking up materials that's not fulfilling, right? And so these ideas, these universal principles, kind of, I think there's many people, no matter what the ethnicity, are seeking something a little bit more. And I think the idea of something that has universal ethical principles behind it and moral principles can really resonate with people, because it's something that everybody can understand. It's something that's in everyday life. It's actionable. It's not, although it's thousands and thousands of years old, it's not dogmatic in a way that is unappealing to people. It doesn't put people off,
So Falun Gong, when you talk about the universal principles and applications, that led to my next question, and that Falun Gong started in China. It's deeply rooted in the ancient Chinese tradition. And then, of course, the teachings are all translated into English, and you can read it. And it doesn't sound like there's any obstacle in terms of getting into Falun Gong, although it came from the Chinese tradition.
Yeah, I think it just takes... China is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, civilization in the world, right? You're talking about roughly 5,000 years.
That's right, yeah.
Of Chinese history. And so when you look at that, you have doctors in Chinese history that can do some pretty amazing things through the practice of Qigong, through the practice of meditation, similar practices, Falun Gong. And so you look at the advancements that they were able to make, and you look at modern medicine. And for me personally, having studied a little bit about, you see that it's actually like kind of the way humanity should be going, and just in my opinion, of that way of looking inward. And they really have a more deeper understanding of the human body and its relation to the universe. And these are kind of things that some people look at and they scoff at. But like you said, I've known a lot of people with serious health issues that have had those resolved, and I can't explain it. I don't know that I can explain it on a logical level, but it's evident.
Yeah. Great. This is just good in terms of bring the practice of Falun Gong to our daily kind of a knowledge about how it can be done, and it's available to anybody in the world. And so I want to kind of hook back to when we started in terms of the persecution in China. So in the West, we are freely practicing, and you can do practice in the parks. And nobody will bother you, and everybody's welcomed in. But in China, if you practice outside, you're going to be tortured and you're going to be arrested. What can we do, in Hawaii, in the U.S., in terms of this persecution in China that's still going on? Of course, you came out to speak to the rally, at the rally, and talk to people about the persecution. What can we do?
Yeah, I think awareness is one of the biggest things a lot of people talk about. When they find out about the organ harvesting especially and how egregious it is, they want to know what they can do. Currently there's legislation. Well, it's more of a resolution that's going through Congress, House Resolution 343, and it's similar to other House resolutions, basically formally condemning the practice of organ harvesting. And I think a lot of people in recent years have talked about the need to put public pressure on the Chinese government. It's one thing to have these talks possibly behind closed doors where no one can see them. I think that's a trap that Western governments fall into with China. Oh, we'll talk about human rights, but only behind closed doors. And it's important that we discuss those things very, very openly and in front of everyone. And we need an answer in front of everyone. So this House Resolution 343 cites about 65,000 deaths of Falun Gong practitioners as a result of state-sponsored organ harvesting. And so this is something that you can write to Tulsi Gabbard and to Kai about if you're a local Hawaii resident, because this is something that they can co-sponsor. And in my opinion, have a pretty big duty to co-sponsor as humans. But that's just my personal understanding. Another thing too is if you go to stoporganharvesting.org, there's a petition on there as well.
So stoporganharvesting.org.
Yeah, .org, and you can find out more information about, especially the egregiousness of those crimes that came out in the 2000s that, to my knowledge, are still going on. We're still getting reports of that. So.
A lot of people, you talk to said, oh, governments have problems. So what can we do? The Chinese government wouldn't listen to us. How is this relevant to us?
Yeah, you look at, it's interesting. There was a guy in I'm blanking on his name, in a labor camp. Labor camps are something that the Russians use. They're called gulags, something that the Chinese Communist Party is using. These labor camps where they're sewing these Homer Simpson slippers and their fingers are bleeding and they're getting paid nothing, right? Slave labor. Yeah. And so one of the guys basically put a note in one of these things that he was sewing, and it came to America, and somebody found it, and it ended up shutting down.
I actually remember reading it. That was what is it? It's a Halloween decoration.
Oh yeah.
That came to Portland. This woman opened it up and saw this note. It was a note in I think it was pretty good English actually, and that was from the Falun Gong practitioners.
Basically,
right?
help me, I'm trapped and being illegally extorted to do slave labor. And so you look at that was one note, that was one woman. That was shut down. Because it's what the Communist Party fears most is this public pressure. So whether or not this legislation, whether or not the resolutions, whether or not the lawsuit is directly going to end the persecution is something I don't know. But I do know that the more people that are aware and the more people that talk about it openly, that's the biggest combating to a dictatorship. That's the biggest combating to egregious human rights.
Awareness, right.
That's the #1 tool that the government uses in China to persecute its people, is the fact that they control the internet, is the fact that they control all the state media. People cannot communicate with each other. But guess what? We're in the Western world. And we have a lot of people that, once they learn about this, are 100% supportive of it ending. Of course. How could you not be? And so this is where we need to put the pressure publicly.
Yeah. Let's take another break, and then when we come back, we'll talk more about this House Resolution 343. We'll be right back.
Aloha, welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii. My name is Josh Green. I'm the host of a program called Healthcare in Hawaii. I'm a physician. I work in the emergency department on the Big Island. I also serve in the state senate, which, please don't hold that against me, doesn't detract from my television program. We speak about all the big healthcare issues in the state. We get together on Tuesdays from 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we try to talk about the most important issues in healthcare. This is a terrific venue for people to learn about healthcare. There are many programs on this station. We broadcast it later, not just on the internet, but also on OC16. Thanks for joining us. Please be informed healthcare consumers.
Hello, we're live, we're back. This is ThinkTech Hawaii, and I'm with Asia in Review. My guest is Ben Maloney, and we've been talking about Hawaii residents sue former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin, basically for crimes against Falun Gong practitioners in the now 16-year-long persecution of Falun Gong that is still taking place in China right now. And we have 12 Hawaii residents filed their lawsuits against Jiang Zemin in China. Of course, these are mostly Chinese citizens who can still, even when you're living abroad, you can still file the lawsuits. And we also have people among us in Honolulu who have experienced persecution against Falun Gong in China, including torture, imprisonment, and other kind of harassments. So that's the background. And so Ben, right before the break, we talked about House Resolution 343, and that is expressing concerns, condemning China's organ harvesting against Falun Gong practitioners. One of the things I'm aware is that these are organ harvesting as a means of persecution against Falun Gong practitioners, and these innocent practitioners are being killed, basically. They are alive, and their organs are taken out of their warm body. Afterwards, their bodies are burnt. A cruel, really unbelievable crime. In addition to just stand on the stance of humanity, what else are more practical in terms of relevance to us and what we can do?
Right. So yeah, the House resolution is just basically on a congressional level to formally condemn organ harvesting of live practitioners. So this particular practice, essentially it was uncovered essentially by David Mattis and David Kilgore in the early 2000s.
And those are the Canadian team,
right? The Canadian team, former parliament member. So these are independent researchers that wrote a book and that exposed this practice. And so in the early 2000s, it was actually extremely blatant. So you could have these websites essentially like advertising organs for sale. So you'd have people, foreign nationals, U.S. citizens, people from all around the world that go to China if they needed hearts, if they need livers. And anybody that knows anything about medical knows you got to match blood types, you got to do these things. And especially for these transplants, like how do you have so many? And how do you, and how are they such exact blood types? And how is it like such a small waiting period?
Like
and a lot of these are
a couple of weeks.
Yeah, a couple of days or a couple of weeks. And how is it just like, it seems, it's almost like a supermarket, not to trivialize the issue but it's almost like a supermarket where they go in and buy these things. So where are these organs coming from? So when they pressured, and where are these organs coming from? You know, you don't have, Chinese don't believe in donating their organs, right? It's not part
There
of
isn't a donation program.
Exactly, it's not, there's nothing there. So they're pressed on it, and they came out, oh, these are from death row inmates or something. So they did some numbers, and absolutely not, right? Absolutely not.
Because the death row inmates are published in terms of numbers.
Yeah, it's published, and they're not even close to the numbers of transplants they were doing, not even close to any of those numbers. And so you get down to it, and you start realizing that there's stories coming out about actually Falun Gong practitioners. So that they arrest them, right? And they know, oh, these people are healthy, they practice this Qigong practice. And they start putting them in these like re-education camps, labor camps to try to get them to give up the practice. And they start doing these blood tests, essentially, and oh, they're pretty healthy. Like, wait, why are these prisoners getting blood tests? And
that's right,
what's the significance of that? And then, you know, getting these firsthand accounts from either prison guards or doctors that have come out and just, I can't do this anymore, of people being put on a table while they're alive and being cut open and having those organs harvested from their body. And then dying.
And people who don't know anything about the background go to China, like Americans go to China, to get the organs.
There wasn't a lot of knowledge about this. I mean, this practice has not been seen.
Yeah.
Right? Something this egregious has really not been seen. And it's actually hard to comprehend. Even as I'm saying it, I've worked in this area for years and years, it's hard to comprehend that level of evil, that incomprehensible level of evil, to do that to a human being. But it's factually happening. And in House Resolution 343, they're citing this guy, Ethan Gutman's numbers. He's an independent journalist, of 65,000 Falun Gong practitioners.
And
that
that's
have likely
between
been killed.
what time to what time?
I think that's 2000 to 2008, so it's an 8-year
So
period.
so that was like earlier time. And
Earlier time, and you know, since it began in '99, and all these prisons are underground, and you don't even have information about it. It's very hard to know. A lot of the independent medical journals and journals like Freedom House and these independent, really well established, they're using a lot of data from what they know about how many transplants people got, and then you know that Falun Gong are the largest prisoners of conscience in China.
That's right. Yeah.
But there's no like exact record of like these people came in and now they're gone, they're disappeared. You have families that kind of talk about people missing, but it's
That's
hard.
right,
It's
yeah.
hard to know. Like I said, when you're dealing with 70 million people, I mean, it's hard to know how big those numbers are.
And here's a flyer that I picked up from the Chinatown rally, and this is about organ harvesting in China, and there are actually prices over there.
Yeah, I mean, there used to be
for different organs.
There used to be that you could go on the website and right there, you know, they have recorded phone calls of people calling the hospitals and asking doctors, and then basically saying, "Hey, are these from Falun Gong practitioners?" And they're like, "Yeah, they're healthy. It's from." I mean, people blatantly admitting from hospitals that these are from Falun Gong practitioners who never would have, number one, are jailed illegally, number two, never would donate it while they're alive. I mean, this is insanity. These are hearts and lungs
that's right.
and livers.
Okay, liver 130,000, lung 170,000, kidney 62,000, heart 150,000, and these are the numbers because you know the Chinese hospitals claim live organs. You know, it's just unbelievable to think about it. Of course, these people can't come out and join the lawsuit against Jiang
Right.
Zemin.
Yeah, it's important, you know, the Martin Luther King quote, you know, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So really, we have to think about, I think, as Westerners, as Easterners, wherever you come from, what world do you want to live in? And for me, I don't want to live in a world where this is going on. So that's part of my motivation is,
Definitely.
you know, if we were in 1938 America and we're hearing stories about Germany, what kind of action would we take? And you always put yourself in that position in your head, like, oh, I would have stood up for people. I would have gone there. I would have done that. But you know, this is happening today. This is happening today with, and it's in a different capacity, and it's a country that we trade with. It's actually more insidious because it's not a country that we're at war with. It's a country we trade with. It's a country that we invest in. It's a country we do business in.
That's right. The world is smaller,
Yeah.
and that's why you have lawsuits against Jiang Zemin coming mostly from Chinese in China, but from people all over the world.
Yeah, the whole world should sue this guy. I mean, you're talking about a crime against humanity.
That's right.
You know,
yeah.
this has
It's
nothing to
everybody's
do-
business.
Has nothing to do with practicing something, a spiritual belief. It has nothing to do with being white or Asian
Yeah.
or anything. It has to do with the fact that, you know, you look at the world tribunals that they had at The Hague for the Nuremberg trials for the Nazis, and they were charged with the same crimes
That's
as
right,
Jiang Zemin's guilty of. So these are like, you know, in the charter that they were charged with. So nothing's changed, and actually they've been pretty blatant about it. There's documented video evidence. I mean, you know, it's pretty on the table.
You know, what's interesting is that looking at these numbers, right now it's at like 150,000. Jiang Zemin has been sued in other countries for crime against humanity. But that was, you know, since the persecution of Falun Gong started in 1999, there were these lawsuits against the main crime doers against Falun Gong. When that's would only happen when these leaders go out of the country, like go to Spain, and some years ago, the Jiang Zemin was sued in Spain, and Spain court actually charged Jiang Zemin with these crimes. Of course, the Chinese government would come in and put pressure on the different governments. But now what's interesting is that the Chinese people are suing in China according to Chinese law. And 150,000, that's a small number because there's so many people practicing Falun Gong. And you can imagine everybody could sue, would be able to sue him for for all these different crimes that everybody's suffering under his persecution. At least the least suffering will be slander and humiliation. That's going on in China. And as you said, people in the world are being poisoned by his lies about Falun Gong with all the censorship of information. And if you read the Chinese website coming out of China, you probably have. I actually, at one point, trying to see, like, if I Google Falun Gong in the Chinese google.com.cn, what would I get? And it's all the hate, almost like it's called hate propaganda.
Yeah, it's all the
against
same.
Falun
It's all the
Gong.
same. Yeah, it's all written by party officials. And
That's right.
that's the issue too, is that when you're dealing with people that are illogical and are dealing with a certain level of insanity, right? To do this, you don't ever have direct logical conversations with them. You don't ever sit across the table with them and have logical conversations based on fact and based on data, because they can never do that, because of course they're standing on a house of cards. There's nothing there. There's no foundation there. So
Yeah.
it's all this secretive, one-sided, sprout out and then nothing back, no questions back, right?
And that's also something living in the West that it'd be hard to understand, because you say, oh, I can talk, right? People may not listen. There are still problems in the government, but people can talk. But in China, you can't talk.
No, there's no talking. There's
Yeah.
no free internet. There's no Googling. I mean, any information you get is directly controlled intensely by the government. Even Weibo, even the different social media platforms are
that's
all
right.
heavily censored. And you post something on there, like police will knock at your door. I mean, it's not like in America we've had the revelations about the CIA and stuff, but I mean it's a billion times worse in China. Like it's really, they will knock on your door immediately for free speech.
Yeah. And internet censorship and everything. So coming back to the lawsuit, the Chinese people are suing against this former leader Jiang Zemin. That's unprecedented, and more people are suing. More people are putting in a lawsuit. What do you think would happen? Would Jiang Zemin really be brought to justice?
I think it's important that for so many years, the only people that were able to speak about this issue, because it was mostly happening in China, so you have practitioners outside of China, they couldn't speak for themselves. So you have this state party that's all around the world issuing lies and slander and persecuting brutally and killing practitioners. And the practitioners having no voice. The only people having a voice is people outside of China. So this is the first time we're really seeing a wave of people in China feeling like that they have a voice in mass. And this is one of the most important things to change in China, is the idea that people come together. So that's the number one thing the government's scared of, right? That's why they don't have internet.
Right,
That's why there's a lot of people that are writing about a lot of different issues in China, but it's here and there and there. They don't know to communicate with each other. So with this issue being the largest group persecuted and probably the most important issue in China today, especially as far as human rights, the idea that people are able to come together now and have information is an extremely powerful force, and a force that, could pressure the international community. I don't know. My personal belief is that perhaps Jiang will be brought to justice by the current administration, maybe, but it'd be hard for them to do that because they'd have to admit the persecution of Falun Gong, which they'll never do. And you still have
That's
people
what's
in power
interesting,
that are still
because the
responsible.
Jiang Zemin's faction is kind of losing out in the political fight, right? But a lot of his followers are in jail for corruption, not at least not openly for the persecution of Falun Gong. So we can kind of wait to see whether Jiang Zemin will be brought to justice on the most egregious account of his crimes against the Falun Gong practitioners, or maybe he be brought in for corruption. So we'll wait and see.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
and
thanks
time
for your
is
time.
up. And that's Ben Maloney. We've been talking about Hawaii residents suing former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin for persecution against Falun Gong. And hopefully you've learned something new, and let's keep watching what's happening in China and hope for the end of the persecution of Falun Gong in China coming up soon. Thank you.